TV here, back again with another live stream for you guys. Spurs were beaten last night 4-2 away at Brighton at the Amex Stadium in what was a terrible result at the end of the day, albeit there was some fight shown at the end of the game, some positives to take away, but we're going to be here to discuss everything, and we're going to be previewing Sunday's game, 2 o'clock at home to Bournemouth after that as well. Joining me today to discuss everything that happened yesterday is Barnaby Slater from the Spurred On podcast. How are we doing, Barnaby?
I'm good. I especially like the way you didn't know what time of the year it was, what day of the week it was. You were like, is it Sunday?
Yeah, I'm trying to work it out.
It's that weird between Christmas and New Year thing. And the fact that Tottenham have lost as well has meant that our brains have gone fuzzy. But determined to bring some positivity after last night's depressing result. I think there are some, as you mentioned, I think there are some things we can take away from that kind of last 15 minutes. And sometimes, I have to say, I texted my nephew to say this today, sometimes you just have to put your hands up. Brighton were good. We couldn't handle their kind of intensity, I think especially early on. And yeah, sometimes you're just not going to come away from games like that with results.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And especially, you know, considering at the beginning of the season, we all said it, didn't we? When Ange got appointed, the football he's going to try and play, how we're going to try and approach games. There are going to be games where we're going to get done. There are going to be games where we're going to come off second best, and we might have to take a few batterings along the way for this project to work. And maybe yesterday, you know, to be fair, I think at 4-0, it was probably one of the only times, if not the only time this season, I think I can come away from a game thinking we've been truly outplayed on a footballing point of view, out-footballed by an opposition from a team. And to do that after 19 games into the season, I think, you know, you just got to take it on the chin sometimes. You just got to say they were the better team. We're going to get turned over sometimes against really good footballing sides. And especially given all the circumstances, the players were missing at the back, all these kind of things. I think I'm just seeing a lot of negativity, essentially, is what I'm trying to say on my Twitter timeline. And I don't think it's completely warranted.
I think negativity after a defeat is just the modern day fan way. We all want us to win every game. It's not going to happen. I completely agree with what you're saying. In fact, Big Ange said it himself. There are going to be bumps in the road along the way. Last night was quite a big bump. But look, we were 4-0 down at that point. I was doing the watch along. If you weren't watching, I was saying this could be 6 or 7. It could easily have been 6 or 7. We should have been maybe 3 or 4 down at half time, to be honest. And it wasn't 6 or 7. And in fact, we got a foothold in the game. And if that Pierre Højbjerg hitting the post shot goes in, Brighton, honestly, they were on their knees at that point. They'd retreated to their kind of 6-yard line. And they were fearing a kind of Newcastle against Arsenal coming back from 4-0 down, check Tiote kind of situation. And that it's important to take the positives away from that. We're absolutely kind of on death's door when it comes to squad depth at this point. There's not much more we could have done. We had, as a lot of people on Twitter say, like the triumvirate of players in the kind of spine that we don't want there, in that Ben Davies, Emerson Royal and Pierre Højbjerg. They all kind of pulled kind of 6 out of 10 performances. I'm not sure any of us thought likely they'd give any more. And we're against a team who want to press us high. They saw those players are playing and they're like, let's press them every time they got the ball and they won't be able to get out. And they couldn't get out. And why are we surprised? So, look, as you said, these kind of games are going to happen. They've happened less frequently than I think any of us would have expected. As you said, 19 games, halfway through the season. We're in 5th place. Don't forget, the same people who I think are slagging Spurs and Ange off a little bit in the timeline today were saying at the beginning of the season, I'd be happy if we ended up 10th or 12th because we've lost Harry Kane. It's a transitional season. We're going to have to learn how to play this completely new style of football. Well, we're in 5th. We're 6 points behind Liverpool, who are top. And there are other teams around us who have spent so much money and are longer into their project and who are struggling way more than we are. And I'm talking about Manchester United, by the way, who we will go to Old Trafford in a few weeks' time. And if we can beat Bournemouth before that, then I think we can go there as a bit of a free hit, especially if we get a good result against Burnley in the Cup as well. So, look, I don't want to run before I can walk, but I think Bournemouth's a huge game. I think we can bounce back. I think we will bounce back. But we have to take some of these performances where we're not, you know, we've not played as well and we've not got the result we want with a bit of a pinch of salt and just say, look, things are not on our side at the moment. It's going to happen.
Going into the specifics of what happened yesterday, obviously, in terms of the lineup, I don't think anyone really expected anything different from what we saw. There was a predicted lineup that we predicted, apart from obviously Oli Skip was a last-minute pullout. He's another injury, unfortunately unexpected, but hopefully he'll be back for Sunday. The first half yesterday was probably, I would have to say, our worst performance of the season. I can't remember us being so thoroughly not just outplayed on a footballing point of view, but also bullied, I would say, by a really aggressive Brighton side at home, who I mentioned, before this game, have only lost one game at home, despite they have had some poor results, drawing at home to Burnley and I think Sheffield United as well. So it's not like they've been like invincible or impossible to play against, but they have only lost one, so they have proven hard to beat when going away from home. And in that first half, we just didn't seem on it at all. We were very much struggling not only to play out the back, it seemed to be, I don't know what the instruction was from Ange Postecoglou, but whenever Vicario got the ball, more often than not, he was going for long passes, especially to the likes of Heung-min Son, who, isn't one to win headers, or duels up the other end of the pitch. Sure. And it was very strange to see in that first half us kind of abandon a lot of the principles that Ange has set for this team throughout the season, I felt. Whenever Brighton got anywhere near our 18-yard line, we were being carved open, like we had no defence even there, it seemed. They were basically creating chances at will. In terms of I can think off the top of my head, the amount of chances Brighton had in that first half. I think Vicario probably made about 3 world-class saves, a couple from Danny Welbeck, one from João Pedro when he was through on goal and he does a delicate chip and somehow Vicario gets fingertips to it. They had 2 shots who hit the post. Milner hit the post. Van Hecke hit the post. They obviously had 2 goals as well. So it was an absolute battering in that first half. I think it's by no means anyone can deny that. It could have been 4 or 5. For you, if you take that first half in isolation, why did it go so wrong in that first half? Was it a lack of bravery on the ball from Tottenham to progress the ball? Was it just being outfought, bullied, second to every duel? Was it basically a combination of everything rolled into one? I was obviously in the stadium. I was actually sitting row 1. So obviously when you're sitting that low down, it's hard for you to see the whole pitch, what's going on. But watching it, obviously on TV, it's hard to assess without really digging deep, and analysing the whole game. But what was your feeling in the studio? Why it was going so wrong in that first half?
Yeah, so I think a combination of a number of those things you mentioned, but most importantly, like I said earlier, you just have to sometimes hold your hand up. I think Brighton had a week to prepare for this game. I think they know they've been in a stuttering run of form. They didn't have Europe before this game, and a lot of the matches they've had the kind of Thursday, Sunday thing. And I think they wanted a big scalp, and they saw this as a big scalp. So they looked, I think, quite deeply into how Spurs play and the personnel that we had on the pitch. And the reason, to mention one of your points specifically, the reason Vicario had to play more kind of mid-range to direct balls into the forwards is because they literally just pressed man for man from every goal kick into Højbjerg. Porro and Udogie not given any space to get the ball, and they wanted us to play the ball between Royal, Davis and Højbjerg, and they knew that if they pressed those players, they would win the ball high up. So that's one reason, and they did it well, and we didn't do anything enough early in the game to scare them that made them think, oh, actually, Højbjerg can take this on the half turn and beat our press, and then they're in. Whereas sometimes, if you have that ability to scare the opposition away from their tactical plan, then things can kind of change and go backwards quite quickly. So that didn't happen. And then the second thing I really noticed, and this is something I talked a lot about in the watch along, and I'd be intrigued to see what you guys think, if you agree with me in the comments. I do think there's a chance that with Pat Matasar, especially, I'm going to use him as the example here, but also with Heung-min Son, obviously, they're going off to their national their championships, as you mentioned earlier off air, their version of the Euros, right? African Nations Cup in Sar's case and the Asian Cup in Sonny's case. And I just think there's a chance that they are thinking a little bit, I don't want to get injured, especially Son, actually, because he's the captain of South Korea. South Korea haven't won the Asian Cup in something like 75, 80 years. It's huge for them. Now, I know we look at the AFCON or we look at Asian Cup, and we don't think much of it because the teams that we support, England in my case, aren't in it. So I think it's easy for us to think, oh, it's a bit of a Mickey Mouse competition. It's not. It's huge for these players. And I'm not saying they're not trying. I'm not saying that Sonny and Sarr weren't trying. I'm suggesting there's a possibility that maybe they were 1 or 2% off their absolute best. And when it comes to Sarr last night, I have to say, I don't want to dig him out. He's had a fantastic season. But there were occasions where he was jogging back. And I mentioned it last night. He was jogging backwards when Brighton had broken our press, and they just had easy chances as a result. Shots on the edge of the box and breaking through us. And I literally shouted at him in real time in one occasion where I was shouting. I was like, he's jogging back. Look at him. Like Amir was with me. He's jogging back, and they made a great chance from it. And I said it at the time, I'll say it again. when Manchester United are playing terribly and lose, especially when they're live on Sky, and they cut to Roy Keane in the studio afterwards, he plays in clips like that where they're jogging back and they're not working hard enough. And last night, for some reason, it could be fatigue as well, there were just players who weren't able to give the intensity that Brighton were giving. That was the main difference, the intensity and the desire. Now, the irony of that is, of course, people were then saying at 75, 80 minutes when they were 4-0 up and suddenly we were all over them, why couldn't we have played like that in the rest of the game? Well, that was because Brighton dropped off. And that comes back to my kind of element of, it's a combination of those things. Brighton absolutely wanted this at the races, desire, wanted to show their home fans during a big Christmas game when the fans have been in the pub all day, the atmosphere is there. We're going to put in a performance for you. And on the flip side, Spurs, not the best personnel in the team to be able to get around it. Romero's injury, I think, is like the straw that's broken the camel's back a little bit. Because sometimes when Romero's playing at centre-back and has the ball, the opposition don't press him the way they press other players. Because they're like, he will beat me with a great pass between the lines, or he will drop a shoulder and give a little 10-yard burst of pace and then play it out to the wide man. So that was a really huge factor as well. But so, yeah, like I said, a combination of all those things. And sometimes you just have to hold your hands up. Brighton, with a better team, deserve to win. And they're going to beat teams in and around us at the Amex this season. That is for sure, especially if they play them at times where they haven't had European games before. If you look at their Europa League record at home, it's unbelievable. So when they're up for it, and it's important to them, they will absolutely turn over teams, and they did that to us.
And I've been looking at Brighton's home results as well. You know, they got a home draw against Liverpool. They have played very well against good sides at home, and I've also looked at the games where they have dropped points, and there is I do see a bit of a pattern, is when they come up against really low blocks, teams set up to frustrate and defend against them, that's when they've really struggled. They lost 3-1 at home to West Ham, they obviously drew 1-1 at home to Sheffield United. They definitely do seem to be a pattern when teams come with a plan to frustrate Brighton and they don't let them play the football that we know Brighton want to play. That's when they struggle.
And what's familiar about that? That's the same with us as well.
Yeah.
Sheffield United at home, West Ham at home. In fact, Brighton are the first team, I'd say, really, I'm not going to count Aston Villa on it, but Brighton are the first team really who play a similar style to us, who have turned us over.
Yeah.
In all those games that we played so far, where we played teams who like to get the ball down and play, you know, high pressing football, we have found space and have kind of dominated that game. Brighton are the first team who've done it. And I would say on that basis, sorry to interrupt by the way,
right,
but on that basis, I think that's where really our injuries and the fact that we are not as far down the line project-wise. I know it's a modern football thing to say project-wise, but De Zerbi's had that squad longer and has been able to drill them longer. Our squad players and depth-wise are not as deep in terms of they're not the players that Ange has picked, has bought, whereas De Zerbi has the players who he knows has the attributes. And they were just a little more ready for that game at that point than us.
Yeah, and I just felt like, obviously, yesterday, we were always going to play our game. We're always going to play the way that Ange has set us up to play. It's going to be going for Brighton, trying to basically outscore them. And I did feel like, especially in that first half, we very much did neglect our defensive duties. You look at that first goal that we conceded, João Pedro is allowed to dance around 3 players. No one's really making a strong challenge. I think one player gets a kind of half challenge, foot on the ball. He's still able to retain possession. He's able to find Hinchelwood free in the box completely. No one near him, and he's able to finish it. I mean, I look back at the corner that we that led to the second goal. Heung-min Son is marking 2 players. Not only is he marking 2 players, both those players are Brighton centre-backs. Yep. He's marking Dunk and he's marking Van Hecke. I mean, who is organising from these corners? I have absolutely no idea what is going on. How is Son the one marking 2 of their centre-backs? And no wonder, obviously, Van Hecke gets his head on the ball and it leads to chaos and we give away a penalty.
I think I'd argue, sorry to interrupt, but I think I'd argue he's actually marking nobody because they play so zonally that actually there's no markers. And there are a few marking instances, one where Højbjerg was on Dunk, and that's a bit of a mismatch. They are bigger. I've said it all season in these watch-alongs. I'm very nervous when we concede set pieces. Actually, I think that's only the second corner of the season we've conceded from, but we very rarely get our first header, our head on the first ball. And then the thing that really frustrated me, I'm glad you brought up the goal, the penalty that was given from the corner. Really angers me actually more than anything else, or alongside some other things. It's a big pet peeve of mine. If you get lucky enough that the ball hits the post, do not then concede or give away a penalty from the kind of the pinball afterwards. You have to be like, oh my God, we've just got away with that. Get rid of it. Be the first one. Now, you know, the penalty decision is interesting. It is a penalty, But I asked Amir last night, and I'll ask you now, if VAR didn't exist, would he have given it first? Do you think he didn't give it first because he's thinking, I'm talking about the ref, did he not give it first because he's thinking, well, if it is a penalty, VAR can get me out of trouble? Or do you think if VAR didn't exist, that's not a penalty because people are tugging at their shirts all the time?
I just think there was so much chaos happening in the box. I don't think he saw
didn't see it.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
I do think it was a clear penalty. I think it's one of the. I'm very much against VAR getting involved in shirt pulling in the box and that kind of element. I hate it. I remember there was one in the Manchester derby given early in the season where Rodri got brought down. I thought it was the softest penalty, yet VAR got involved because one of the United players had an arm around Rodri. I hate when VAR gets involved in those kind of incidents because I feel like they happen at every corner. However, I did feel like yesterday was a bit different. Welbeck was just literally about to line up a shot, and Kulusevski does literally pull him back. I think that was clear as day as penalty. I don't think it was like an instance of like half of what 6-1, half done. Like I don't think it was one of those incidences where I really hate penalties being given. I thought Kulusevski literally prevented him from shooting.
I agree.
And I think that was a difference.
One of the things I was saying to Amir is I think actually Welbeck just plows that into the net if he doesn't pull him back. So what Kulusevski's trying to do is like get away with one, basically. I've got a slight tangent, but overarching question now. Why, is there not an argument to say, why don't they ban, as kind of contact is mostly banned in terms of pulling shirts and everything everywhere else on the pitch, why don't they just ban that from corners as well? Why don't, from the start of next season, referees tell all the players, just so you know, if you touch anyone when you're trying to defend them from a corner, it'll be a penalty. And after 2 weeks, it wouldn't happen anymore. I don't really understand. I know it's a bit more of an overarching question, but it's like, same with the handball rule. I'm not saying this should happen, and I'm definitely not saying it will happen because it won't. But if they actually just said all handball is handball,
anytime it touches
the hand, then it makes it the easiest thing to govern, right?
But you're just going to get a bunch of players aiming the ball at people's hands, though, aren't you?
Well, I mean, we've suffered most from that, right?
We have. Definitely.
So it's not like players aren't already doing that. Now, look, some games would finish 14-13 or whatever, but is there not an argument to say maybe that's how it should be? All I'm saying is, I just think, especially with the kind of grappling in the box thing, by allowing it to some degree, they're therefore making a rod for their own back because there's no possibility of consistency in decision making when it's totally subjective up to each referee. How much does it matter, or which player is doing it? Like, you can be sure that if Romero's got his hand around someone's body when he's defending, he's going to get a penalty given against him because referees are kind of alive to Romero being a bit of an on the edge player. But anyway, sorry, it's a tangent.
No, I 100% agree with you, and I think it drives you mad what's given what's. In fact, there was a clear example even last week against Everton. Kulusevski does something similar in the box, and that wasn't given a penalty. This one was. Obviously, look, we go into half time. Obviously, I think Richarlison has one chance right at the end. He hits the post, but that would have been completely undeserved. We would have scored that. We were completely battered. It should have been 4-5-0. But going to the second half, I know obviously the game did go to 3 and 4-0, but for me, being in the stadium anyway, we did come out in the second half a lot stronger. We did try and force the issue, show a bit of urgency. Richarlison had 2 goals chalked off offside, and he also had 1 save from the keeper as well. We were in the ascendancy, and as well, what was really unlucky is Gio was stripped off, ready to come on, and in that process, Estepinian sticks one in the top corner from 30 yards. So from that point of view, I felt like in the second half, that when that goal goes in, it probably goes in our best period of the game at that time, and probably that third goal goes in at the worst point in the moment for Spurs, because at 3-0, that's a real killer, isn't it? Because if we get the next goal at 2-1, I think there's a really good chance we get back in the game. But at 3-0, especially as Gio's about to come on, that the game's gone at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I said it all the way along the line. Whoever gets that third goal, I think if we'd got the third goal, we would have probably gone and nicked a point. I really do, at least a point. But it's, much of a muchness now, really. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe I was more negative in the studio last night and it felt a bit better in the stadium, but I didn't feel like Tottenham came out in the second half and really kind of gave enough to make me think things were going to change. And I think Brighton were just kind of toying with us for the majority of that game until probably 75, 80 minutes. Amir in the watch along was definitely saying he was disappointed with Ange for not bringing on Lo Celso at half time. I would say probably I'd agree, just on the basis that Sarr, like I said, had already showed me that he wasn't kind of able or willing to kind of put in the required effort. And at that point, being 2-0 down, sure, Lo Celso's not going to be the player who's going to be the engine getting up and down, but he is a player who's going to come and get the ball off your likes of Royale and Davis and Højbjerg, who aren't as comfortable with the ball at their feet. So I kind of agree with Amir that maybe he should have brought Lo Celso on at half-time and at least given ourselves a chance of wrestling back some control over the game. That's kind of my main kind of takeaway on it, really. But you can also look at it the other way, which is, yes, Lo Celso, when he came on, he looked, as he does, always willing to get on the ball, always sharp on the ball, likes to play that lovely little 1 and 2 touch stuff, get the returns, but also, giving away that penalty was mad. Because if you look at it in hindsight, and I said this last night, I hope be a big learning for Spurs, is don't let it get to 3 or 4-0. Because if you keep it at 2-0 in the Premier League, that last 10 minutes, which has now become the last 20 minutes, is absolutely huge. And if we'd managed to keep it at 2-0, listen, you can't account for him putting it in the top bin from there. But also, nobody closed him down.
Correct.
And that has actually been a regular thing with Spurs in terms of nobody closing down crosses and closing down long shots. And then also mentioning that, because this is also something Amir was talking about during yesterday's watch along, we're not taking any pot shots at all. We're trying to score the perfect goal, almost like 10, 12 years ago, Wenger Arsenal style around the box. These little moves that aren't working. We didn't get any luck with the ball kind of bobbling to us like they did for their first goal. But take a few shots. You might get a deflection. You just don't know. And we're not doing enough of that. And Estupiñán deserves all the credit for that goal because he did take that shot. So look, that's the big learning for me. Don't let it get, if you're in the hole, if you're in the mud at 2-0, don't let it get 3 or 4 because you just don't know. And the reason I started talking about that is because I think Lo Celso, with that kind of lazy tackle from behind for the penalty, that was just stupid. He wasn't tired. He'd only just come on and he had a line of centre-backs in front of him who could have blocked the shot, I think. So, some learnings to take there. But look, by no means was this all negative. There are some positives, but it's one for me that we just, we go through, we deal with the depression, we remember it's Christmas, and then we push it to the back of our minds and beat Bournemouth and don't think of it again.
Yeah, in terms of, we did go to 3-4-0. The one positive we will bring up and we'll talk about is that late fight back that we attempted in the last 15 minutes. And just to credit the character of the team, I think most teams in the Premier League in that position I probably give up and just focus on damage limitation at that point at 4-0. Yes. And I am somewhat proud and I do give the team credit because, it was the goals that we did score, it was Kulusevski's pressing that, we didn't stop during the game. He robbed Lewis Dunk of the ball. Obviously, Son goes on to set up Valise, who gets his first goal for Spurs. We then continue to create chances. Porro obviously assists Ben Davis at the back post. We make it back to 4-2. And 4-2 with 5 minutes to go, plus there was 9 minutes added on for stoppage time as well. There were definitely chances there for us to get it back to at least 4-3. Højbjerg hits the post. I think Steele makes a couple of saves, I think one from Porro as well. I think at least what we can take away, I know you can definitely put it down to Brighton dropping off at 4-0. They probably thought the game was won essentially, and they definitely thought we're just going to see out this game and we're just going to basically drop off. And we've seen it how many times in Premier League when a team is that far ahead, they just basically see out the game and just play it around. And Brighton were definitely doing that. But I am somewhat proud, and I do think it definitely tells us something about the character of this team that at 4-0 we still kept going right till the end, and we did even give ourselves an opportunity to get back in the game. A lot of fans will rightly say it's too little too late, it's all well and good doing it in the last 15 minutes, why didn't you do it in the previous however long 70 minutes? But you can't just write off completely. I do want to give the team some credit, and I think in a weird way, after that late show of fight at the end of the game, I did come away with it feeling a lot better about the defeat than I would have if we just meekly would have lost the game 4 or 5-0.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that kind of momentum shift can affect you going into the next game. And then also, I just think that's Ange ball, really, which is Ange is never going to bring defenders on when he's 4-0 down. He's just going to say, keep playing, keep playing. It's kind of similar to that Chelsea thing. We went to, 2 men sent off and he was just like, keep playing, keep the high line, because it's more about the longer term culture and the philosophy of the squad and the club and everything. And I agree. I think there are positives to be taken from that. I wonder, honestly, whether, and I know this shouldn't matter, but I wonder whether if Arsenal had turned over West Ham last night, maybe I'd be more upset now than I am. It feels like it took the edge off a little bit for me, and maybe it shouldn't do, but I'm admitting it. But yeah, I think again, it'll be, the main takeaway will be that this is a game we can learn from. These things can happen, and if you don't turn up at 100% to a game like Brighton away in a Christmas period and a night game, you're going to get trounced.
Yeah, 100%.